Shalom uvracha, welcome. My name is Rabbi Nati Helfgot. I've been a long-time teacher here at Drisha for many years. I still am teaching once a week an adult education class, and I welcome you to this week's Dvar Torah, which is on Parashat Vayeishev, which begins the longest narrative that we have, sustained narrative in the Bible, the narrative of Joseph and his brothers. But more correctly, we should say that it's Joseph, his brothers, and their father, Jacob. It's actually a triangle narrative between all the different elements of the family. And of course, this week's Parsha, we begin with a very tragic story of the tension within the family, and which comes nearly to shfichut damim, to murder, where the brothers are literally ready to kill their brother and to let him die in a pit, and eventually he's taken out of the pit, and we of course know the rest of the story. What I'd like to speak about this afternoon is the question of what exactly was the motivating factor behind the tension, and how do we understand it? Was it simply a case of sibling rivalry? A fight about a coat? These people, that's what they were literally ready to kill each other about? It's clear that there's something more going on here on a much deeper level. And to understand it, we have to always remember that even though we have now moved ahead from last week's Parsha, and it's a full week later, in the text, it's very much, each Parsha is connected to the previous portion. And it's doubly difficult sometimes because chapter 36 of the book of Genesis, which is the chapter right before our chapter, seems to have nothing to do, and has nothing to do with the immediate story that we are studying this week. And so we feel very disconnected from the past Parsha. But it is the only way to understand the motivation of the characters in our story has to do with looking back at the previous Parsha. What was the motivation? It's very clear from the stories of Jacob and his conflict with Esau, going back and to the household, is that there's an amazing tension within the family of Jacob around the question of love, of who will receive Jacob's love. But not only who will receive Jacob's love, who is the preferred family, the preferred wife, the preferred children. We know in the previous Parashat Vayeishev, we have the very, very deep tension between Rachel and Leah. Rachel is beloved by Jacob, while Leah sees herself as hated, snuah. She says, for I am hated. The question is at the core of the Dinah story, the story of the rape of Dinah. Dinah was from the Leah line. And part of the tension, the underlying tension there, is Shimon and Levi, who also are from the Leah line, who ask, Hachizona yaset achotenu. They end up and they say, will our sister become like a harlot, be treated like a prostitute? Means what's really underlying the tension there is, does Yaakov care enough about our family, our part of the family? Or are we also going to be treated exactly to the way everybody else in the book of Genesis, where it's been a zero-sum game, where there was a Ishmael and there was a Yitzchak, there was an Isaac and an Ishmael. And ultimately Ishmael was cast out of the family, never to remain part of the covenantal destiny. There was a Yaakov and an Esau, who came from the same mother, not even two different mothers. And ultimately Esau leaves the scene. In last week's parasha, after the rapprochement between Jacob and Esau, Esau goes on his own path. And Esau dwells outside of the covenantal family, and outside of the covenantal land, in Edom. And Jacob now continues. Vayeishev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. And the question that occurs here, that comes up here, is the brothers see, especially the Leah line, see that Jacob is doing, from their perspective, doing the same thing. With the favoritism to Joseph and eventually to Binyamin, who is the firstborn of Rachel. Is history repeating itself? Will there also be no room for them, ultimately, in the covenantal destiny and in the covenantal family? It's interesting, Rabbi David Silver, the founder and the head of Drisha, has noted that it's very interesting on a Peshat level, in the plain sense of the text, the Bible tells us that Joseph would return and bring Vayavei Yosef et dibatam ra'a el avihem. Joseph would bring the evil speech about the brothers to their father, to Jacob. Most interpreters interpret dibar ra'ah here referring to Joseph spoke lashon hara, spoke evil about the brothers, that the brother had done something. The brothers had done something. But Rabbi Silber suggests the word dibar ra'ah here may mean the evil speech that they had said. What do I mean? What does he mean? If we look back in last week's Parsha, Shimon and Levi attack their father, but they don't do it to his face. If you look carefully at the text, after the story of the rape of Dinah and Jacob's rebuke of the brothers, it says, Vayomer Yaakov el Shimon vel Levi achartem oti. Jacob said to Simon and Levi, you have brought trouble upon me. Vayomru, it doesn't say Vayomru elav. They said back to him. It says Vayomru. They muttered under their breath, or in their tent, not in front of their father. Hachazonah yaset achotenu. They said those things, but they didn't necessarily expect Jacob to hear them. But Joseph brings that to the fore. Joseph speaks about the tension. Joseph brings to the fore the tension between the Leah line and the Rachel line that had been put at least a bit to rest in the intervening years. And from their perspective, once again, the specter and the shadow of a zero-sum game comes to the fore. And the challenge of the Jacob narrative, the Joseph and his brothers and Jacob narrative is, will Jacob be able to maintain the unity of the family? Will he be able to convince and create a framework in which all of the brothers and all of the players are in, while at the same time recognizing some sort of hierarchy? Or will it once again have to be a zero-sum game? That's the challenge that plays itself out in the next few parshiot as we learn this story carefully. I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a meaningful Shabbat.